Hi everyone, you're listening to the RAD Experience on BRIMBANK Live. My name's Roshani and I'm joined by the amazing AD. On today's show, we're chatting about youth engagement to understand what should occur in creating a space for young people to be involved, included and engaged with, as well as what responsibilities we have as adults in increasing this engagement with them. We are now joined by some of BRIMBANK's incredible youth workers, Molly, Akuch and Najib, who are going to delve into their work with young people in the community in making this all happen. Guys, welcome to the show. Thank you all for giving us your time.
Pleasure.
Well, first of all, you can have a go at kind of introducing yourselves and describe what your role is in working with young people within the space that you do work within BRIMBANK. Molly, you can go first.
Okay. So at the moment, my role is the team leader of the Young Communities team, and that sits in BRIMBANK Youth Services. So Najib is a member of my team. I've been in this role for about a year and a half at BRIMBANK, and prior to that, I was the Youth Development Officer within Youth Services as well, so also for about a year and a half. So I've been at council nearly 3 years. And in both capacities, I suppose my role has really focused on creating opportunities and creating spaces for young people to have a say and to be heard, as well as kind of developing necessary systems literacy both for myself and for young people to be able to enact change. I'd also say that my current role as team leader, part of my role is to work with young people as colleagues, which is quite an interesting space to work in when you take that kind of, when you think about kind of the traditional youth work lens and how young people are often kept out of professional spaces or seen as separate to professional youth work spaces. So we've kind of consciously chosen to build a team of young people who live in or are connected in some way to BRIMBANK. And so I guess part of my role is also thinking about how our practice and our team shifts and changes as a result of having a team structure that looks like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Najib?
So it's interesting because I work in two roles. So I'm part of Molly's team in the Young Communities team. And in that role, I work as a youth worker, working with young people in like a committee-like setting. But then I also work as a bilingual learning outreach officer at BRIMBANK Learning Futures. And both of the roles are quite separate. One is more so learning and employment focused, and one is more so youth participation and youth empowerment focused. But the roles are quite interesting because they both intersect with one another, like learning and employment and being able to participate and having a voice and having ownership. It all coincides with each other. Yeah. So it's really interesting to do work that I guess is around sort of like, how can I best maneuver between these two roles and integrate my work in a way that makes them sort of like streamline, and not thinking at the role about the roles as being two separate opposing things, but things being like in partnership with each other. So that's pretty fun. Yeah.
Nice. And lucky last, Akuch?
Akuch, yeah. Well, I'm a bilingual learning outreach officer from BRIMBANK Learning Futures. So Najib is my colleague on his other days of BRIMBANK Learning Futures. So my role is mainly to do with programming and doing outreach into the community. And that outreach, there are no parameters around it. We work with all age groups. However, we also we try to engage a lot of young people in our programming as participants and as people that can go out back into their community and try to empower other young people. So, Najib has been doing the dance between the two roles, but we do work very closely, and we have a great relationship with the youth team. So I guess it's safe to say that we're all in it for the same reasons, to, work with young people, to empower them, and to, shape them into leaders that we want to see in our communities.
Absolutely.
That's amazing work, guys. Can you tell us how youth work differs from, other types of learning, like teaching and mentoring?
Molly, did you want to go first?
No, Najib, this is your question.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting because like I think how youth work differs from like teaching and other like learning, because it's like in a sense it's like youth work I guess falls under the same principles, because the young people that you work with and the community that you serve, you're teaching them, but it's not like in like a formal like structure. It's quite informal, and there isn't like this sense of like hierarchy in other structures that are put in place where like learning has to be at the pace that you want them to learn. It's really about sort of like the young person or the community member. They're all really on their journey themselves, and you are kind of just like facilitating the process. And it's
So would you say that like youth work is a combination of teaching and mentoring? Like you have the best of all worlds. You are everything to that child.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. It's probably like the best of teaching from, I guess, like having sort of like that guidance and that direction and that support, but with that sort of like that mentality of like they need to
That hierarchy.
that like sense of hierarchy that is in formal structures, and then that sense of I guess mentoring, because like you are essentially going on a journey with whoever you're working with, and then with going on a journey with people, there's like a deep level of care and investment that you put in for the person, for their personal growth, and the programs that you do and the things that you refer them to or the skills that you try to show them. It's like it's all for their like personal growth. So yeah, it's really great. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that because I'm from a teaching background. So I started my career off as in secondary English and English as an additional language teacher. And I think it's one of those instances, I think, where often the system in which teachers operate damages potentially not only young people but teachers themselves, because you do see lots of really incredible teachers who are already working in that intersection, who are working in that mentoring capacity, who are working to take on a whole range of roles really in the lives of young people, but do not have the time or capacity and are often under quite intense pressure to be, as Najib said, working at a very particular pace and bringing everybody along without necessarily having the time to work together or to allow young people to lead or to determine what they would like curriculum and their classroom and learning and pedagogical experience to look like. So, I mean, that probably tells you why I'm not in the classroom anymore as well. But I think in this space, we do have much more space as workers, space and time and capacity to explore those things with young people and to work in that way with young people, which is
to make an impact.
Which is an absolute privilege, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree. I agree with both of the answers. I think with youth work, it's a bit more fluid in what we do or how we address young people's need, and the young people are more in the center of all those projects or program that we design and deliver for them. And that's not to say that teachers don't do the same thing, although I personally believe teachers' title should be a / youth worker, because I feel like they do a lot of youth work, but they are also restricted, by their, teaching policies and procedures and whatnot. Whereas youth work, I think those parameters are a little bit loose compared to those of the teachers. So it gives you a bit more alleyway to do things a little bit differently and to try to design things that actually address individual youth needs, not as a group or not as one ethnic background. So I think it gets a little bit deeper when you're a youth worker and you have the capacity to do that, well, in most cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that idea of youth work being more fluid and really centering the young person, compared to, teaching that has those rigid structures sometimes, is really like imperative and prominent to youth work and youth work that is done compared to teaching. I know that in the community sector and, like myself as a researcher looking into papers about youth engagement, a lot of the time there's this prominence of youth disengagement, and it's spoken about a lot. I know that, in council and just like in general, this idea of young people being disengaged is quite prominent. Why do you think that youth disengagement is something that is spoken about, and even that term is thrown around quite a lot, especially with young people, especially in this area of Brimbank?
And I'd say we all have conversations about that, about why the term is used and why it's become so emotive, but also so problematic. I think purely from a statistical or a data perspective, disengaged purely means someone who's not enrolled in school or not employed. It's just a measure of that, right? But I think within the community sector, it's become shorthand almost for a whole range of things. Antisocial behaviour is one of them. Although if you've ever kind of watched those videos of, private schoolboys on trams, yelling misogynist kind of chants, then you know that antisocial behaviour is not limited to people who have experienced disadvantage. But also it's often linked to cultural background. So I don't think it's ever done explicitly, but I think when we talk about disengaged groups of young people, there's often this kind of undertone of speaking about particular cultural backgrounds, particularly ethnic backgrounds. And it's interesting too, I recently had a conversation with somebody about our new youth strategy. So we've just been going through the process of having feedback for the BRIMBANK Youth Strategy for the next 4 years. And one of my colleagues from the community sector pointed out that the term disengagement is used in there. And so, that kind of tells you that it's contentious even within the youth service. And he said, is there a different word you could use? Is there a way that you could express that differently? And I think my reflection of that was that the reason that we find it so hard to use a different term or find a synonym or find something that is less kind of pejorative is that it actually speaks to a particular lens and a particular perspective on the work and on the role of the youth worker or the adult in relation to the young person. And I think that's why it's so difficult to navigate it, because we keep getting stuck in that space when actually we probably need a more imaginative way of capturing what that relationship, what that dynamic is between the worker and the young person.
I also think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the word disengagement puts the onus on the victim or the child, and it's not taking responsibility, when it comes to the content and the reasons behind that disengagement.
Absolutely. And so that's what I mean in terms of imagination, imagining kind of a different world in which we don't talk about engaging. It's not about a young person opting in to something that we're choosing to run. It's not about young people conforming to particular standards of behaviour and the onus being on young people to conform to those standards. The work that Lauren Oliver from Berry Street has done has been around looking at, rather than talking about engage, let's talk about exchange. So let's move to a model where it's actually working on that equal playing field and recognizing that young people have just as much to bring to a conversation and just as much to teach and to guide adults, youth workers, as as the opposite way around, I suppose.
I always have my reservation also around the term disengagement, because I feel, well, from my experience, the term disengagement itself is very disengaging to young people.
Yeah.
If you tell a group of young people that they are disengaged group, you're most likely not going to engage them, because you've already labeled them as they're not interested, they're disengaged. And that gets into their head that if we are already being categorized into this bucket of we're not interested, why should we bother? Not knowing that there are ways to work around that. At the end of the day, it is just a term, but it's the meaning that it carries that can either make or break the relationship with the young people that you work with.
Yeah.
Can I just extend on that a little bit? I think it also speaks to the kind of societal dichotomy or binary kind of thinking that we have about young people, either as a problem and criminal and something that needs to be fixed, or as kind of someone who's, the perfect ATAR scores and, raising money for charity, and that kind of exemplary unicorn is the term that, again, that Lauren Oliver from Berry Street uses, those shining examples of young people. And we often don't work within that space of complexity and, the grey area that we all exist in as human beings. But when we kind of create those labels, we're telling young people we see you either as this or as this.
Yeah. And if I could jump in quickly, I think, like, for me, the word disengagement, I guess, I find it to be almost like really coded. It's a really coded word. And it makes, I think, in terms, we shouldn't be thinking about sort of like disengagement, like what are young people disengaged from, but it's like, what are they actually engaged in? If they're not in school, what other forms of learning are they participating? If they're not if they're not part of, I guess, community centers, what other communities are they belonging to and doing work in? Because you can be engaged, you can be disengaged from one thing, but you can be engaged in a multitude of things as well. I think the conversation needs to be shifted in terms of like, what are the vast majority of things people are engaged in, as opposed to like, what is one or two things that you're disengaged from?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think also, continue.
No, that was it. Yeah.
I think I was just going to say, and what you said there, Najib, was, it kind of stood out to me, that idea of what should be engaged with and what is ideal to be engaged with. And I know that one big thing that society puts out there is education and being engaged in education, and that is seen to be, an important thing. And sometimes those who kind of are engaged in other facets of their life and not education is seen to be a problematic thing. And then that kind of leads to that label of disengagement. But as you were saying, it's not necessarily that that label and that negative connotation that comes with that label should be put onto that young person, when there could be 10 other things that they are thoroughly engaged in and that they have a passion in. But those ideals kind of make it so that that particular one thing that person is not engaged in suddenly, constitutes them not, being disengaged, quote unquote. But yeah.
And as well as, not being heard, or the word disengaged being thrown at young people, what are some other structural barriers that young people face, do you feel?
Because I mean, like, I know that in, systems, young people are often not privileged in the way that systems are structured, and that itself can make it quite difficult for young people to navigate through these systems and institutions because of kind of barriers that they may have, and people within those systems that think a certain way and that throw those kind of labels on them. What kind of other things do you all feel that young people structurally need to face? And there's intersections of what makes a young person as well, and those things come into play. Like in your experience of working with young people, what structural barriers have you seen with the young people you've worked with?
I mean, I think youth work is improving a lot, and that's to do with, like you've mentioned, acknowledgement of intersectionality, that young people have experiences, or in negative or positive experiences in many areas of their lives. So I think when I was a young person growing up, programs were catered and delivered in one specific areas. Say if it's just employment, then they just focus on employment. But I feel like now that's expanding. Those parameters and limitations on how to work with young people are getting looser, because there is a lot of discussion around intersectionality and what experiences different young people from different cultural backgrounds, from different languages, from different side of the earth, what experiences do they bring to the table, and how we can put them in the center and sort of try to, we can't fix it all, but sort of try to address all of those barriers in a safe and culturally sensitive manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other kind of things that you can think of that kind of limit young people? And I know that we've kind of touched on, systems and how adults can sometimes approach young people, and youth work is a sector that kind of, looks, as Akush said, acknowledge that, and trying to center young people and take a more fluid approach to working with young people. But anything else that you guys can think of or elaborate in relation to that?
I guess other probably structural barriers is like decision making. And I say that because like when I was a young person, I was like going through high school, like towards like, the VCE period, even just having the opportunity to just choose what you want or where you want to go or what you want to do. Sometimes you have, I guess, adults that sort of like determine that for you. And then it almost like shatters like your sense of agency in that sense. Like you're like, I know myself, I know what I want to do, I know where I want to go, but you're dictating that for me. You're making that decision for me.
Yeah.
So I think decision making is, I think, a huge structural barrier for our young people. Yeah.
I guess I'd like to ask the impact of discrimination in your experience. What impact has discrimination played on the youth in terms of disengagement? In terms of like stories that you've heard before, maybe kids coming in and being like, I've stopped doing this because,
I guess.
Go on,
no, you want to go? I was just saying, like, some of the things I heard, like, I hear about when people are like discriminated against, it really affects their like sense of worth, because they realize that they're all these barriers, these impossible barriers that they can't break through, and it really like almost like crushes their spirit. Like they're not given a chance, or they're not given sort of like an opportunity, or they're not given like the opportunity to flourish. Really it really cuts them the sense of worth. Yeah.
I think some examples of what I've seen in the youth work space, but also in the education space that have been really disappointing, have been where you see how assumptions kind of infiltrate decision making. So you see where a discussion might be being had around, like the police talk about antisocial hotspots, right? And so where you are in conversations where they are being mentioned, you might have people in the room who go, oh, it's the Pacifica kids, or, oh, it's that South Sudanese group, and who make that assumption very quickly that from between what disengagement looks like, what disengagement is, and who the perpetrators of disengaged behaviour are, and often they are culturally associated. And so, of course, if you are a person from a background that is a non-white background, often non-Anglo background, that is going to play out in how you then navigate the world, and your understanding of how you're seen by people in authority.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that combination of those things occurring with, that lack of, autonomy that young people have, and in decision making, as Najib was saying, and the combination of all those things can be quite detrimental to young people and how they then go about, engaging in particular spaces. And I think that sometimes it's seen as, when we're talking about youth disengagement, it's seen as all the kind of responsibility then shifts onto the young person, when really there's a lot of other things going on, and it's not just the young person's responsibility to then try to fix that or try to overcome that, but it's also that acknowledgement around people that work with young people and adults, and systems that surround them that really need to kind of acknowledge those things in order to make it better.
That's very briefly, do you mind just thinking about employment, and how organisations work in terms of how they select candidates for employment and for interview, and obviously we are aware of the research around how candidates for interview are selected based on kind of anglicisation of names, which is of course super problematic, but even kind of that white supremacy culture that filters through to things like how your CV is presented, and the kind of the perfectionist kind of approach to selecting candidates. I just that system, the kind of that is often very flawed and often does not allow for diverse diverse in terms of kind of experiential diversity. I'm not talking about cultural diversity necessarily. I'm talking about kind of diverse range of
experiences,
life stories and experiences and skills, and they're often not allowed for, and particularly for young people who are already seen as being kind of less
problematic
in terms of who are their knowledge is less and their skills are less and their capabilities are less, and so how could they possibly be right for a particular role? And then on top of that, organisations like council, for example, a lot of our hiring are for roles that are permanent and full-time, and in order to have an opportunity for some of those roles, you often need to have had some kind of association, done work experience, or done some kind of unpaid work that young people often cannot do.
If you're joining us, we are here talking all things youth engagement with Molly, Akuch and Najib. This team of youth workers do some amazing work with young people in the community and are discussing the barriers in which young people face and also the ways in which those working with young people as well as the community can look to support, encourage and empower young people in particular spaces and spheres. So we were kind of discussing the barriers that young people face and the ways in which people tend to think about young people in society. And normally these ways of thinking stem from, teaching, and they stem from this idea that young people may not have, knowledge or shouldn't have as much power as young people, or, young people being discredited regarding their opinions and their voice. So all these kind of affiliations of adultism, really, like thinking that young people don't have this power. How is this, especially in the youth work sector, how is these ideas unlearned and navigated? Because I can imagine that, sometimes going through like the education system, even as a young person, understanding that, like there is someone higher than me, or there's someone who is more powerful than me in this space. How is that then unlearned within the youth sector space of trying to center young people and platform their voice?
I think the way it's sort of like unlearned is like, I probably would love to say like the way it's like decolonized.
Yeah.
I think it's like you have to really embed yourself in like a part of a community with young people. Like I don't think you can have that sort of approach where you detach yourself from working with like a community or with young people, and like you put them over here and then you're on one side. Because then if you do that, then it's like you don't really understand the people that you're, I guess, working to serve. So you really have to embed yourself into the community, talk to young people, understand their stories, understand their life experiences, and then also you have to it's really interpersonal. Like you have to also share parts of your story and get to know them. You really have to take a journey. You can't have this like top level approach with working either with young people or in the community, where you kind of just like send an email and that's it. Like you gotta get out, you gotta talk to people, you gotta know who you're working with.
About building that rapport, but also checking yourself, and checking, sometimes like as adults, checking your privilege as an adult. Absolutely. Molly and Akuch,
I just wanted to reflect on how much I kind of love what Najib has said there about being part of a community. I think that is really kind of fundamental and crucial, that it's not this, you don't sit separately or outside of the lives of young people. You're not working in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You're part of interconnected web of human beings, and you have to kind of acknowledge that and approach it with humility, I think. And I think I was just reflecting on thinking about kind of my journey a little bit from kind of teaching into the youth work space. And I think what I saw and learned and what kind of shifted me over was seeing what didn't work, seeing that when you go into a classroom and you kind of are demanding essentially through your practice, not necessarily overtly, but through your practice, that young people conform and conform to a particular set of standards that have been kind of arbitrarily decided upon. And you recognize that that does not work. You recognize that it causes more damage, that it, especially to young people who already feel dismissed, not listened to, undervalued, and who have been made to feel inept by people who look like me, who speak like me, then you have to have the humility and the willingness to change and the willingness to learn and do the work to change your practice. And I think that's why, for me, that shift happened, because I did do some of that work with young people and saw the difference it makes when you exchange, when you work together to create new possibilities and to create new realities together. And you offer yourself as a resource for young people to be able to navigate that and to be able to do that, to lead that conversation, I suppose. Yeah. Akuj?
Yes, I agree with you both, Molly and Najib. Particularly, I like how Najib said it's a journey. It is definitely a journey, and for me, I think it's also having resilience, because it's not often that you start working with young people and everything is all roses and sunshine. It takes a lot of patience and resilience. And I think for me, in my experience, it's being patient with them and being part of a community, like Najib said, and being really engaged, and also reflecting, evaluating your own self. And sometimes I even get the young people to evaluate me, to give me feedback on, how I'm doing, or, areas which they think I should improve on, because at the end of the day, they're the one that are receiving the services, or the one that we are working with. So that self-reflection, can't just come from me, because, an unconscious bias does play a role sometimes, because we're human beings. So having resilient and patient, and also having a listen here, being heard, I think it's one of really the most important thing when you're working with people. It's not only just young people, like all people, all age group. When someone feels like they're being listened to, they're probably more likely to speak comfortably, and that comes after going on a journey with them, or building that rapport, and being patient, and being always engaging, and showing that you are there, but you're not only there to practice your policy and procedures and make sure you're ticking your own boxes, but you are there to also learn from them.
Beautifully said. I love the community part, exchanging instead of and getting kids to evaluate you. I think that's a great way to get people involved, and what better way to feel like you're heard than to have that opinion and that responsibility to
actually the Victorian SRC, Victorian Student Representative Councils, like the peak body for student representative councils, they run a program called Teach the Teacher, where young people design professional development for teachers. It'd be so awesome, I think, to have something equivalent in the youth workspace, because it would be, it'd be great to kind of, we often get things like cultural competency training, that kind of corporate competency training. It would be amazing to see and to pay young people to be developing professional development for youth workers. To kind of for young people to determine what youth workers need to be learning.
It's a great idea.
Well, I could also just jump in quickly as well. I think just adding to what Molly was saying, like it's interesting, because like the way I guess like we think about sort of like knowledge is like, one person, say a youth worker, has gotten like their masters and they've done all this kind of stuff, and now they're sort of like they have all this knowledge, but it's like knowledge is not really like that. It's like, yes, you as a worker have a sense of, you have lots of knowledge in things, but like the people that you're serving, they have equally just as much as knowledge as you do. Very different, of course.
But that's why we talk about lived experience, right?
Exactly.
That's why we talk about and raise up lived experience as something that has a value that isn't necessarily quantifiable by pieces of paper. That we need to be incorporating lived experience into the knowledge base of everything that we do.
And I think as the worker yourself, I think sometimes you have to take not only just like a step back. I think you have to be really realistic in knowing like you don't know everything, and you have to really ground yourself in you don't know everything.
That's that humility thing, right?
Yeah, and you shouldn't know everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to keep learning. That's the thing. You don't kind of
keep learning.
You're like, I've learned it all now.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm
I'm done here. See you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've heard about the skills and characteristics that youth workers need to work with young people and to make them feel more valued. What can everyday adults do to create, a safe environment and a meaningful environment for or between themselves and young people in the community space?
I think it definitely goes back to exactly what both Najib and Akuch touched on before, which is about listening. So whether you are talking about, a child-parent relationship or a teacher-student relationship or just a member of the public and a young person in public spaces relationship, it's about that openness to learn and a willingness to meet people on an equal plane, I suppose. Meet young people are just also people. To meet fellow human beings kind of on that equal level, and to take into account where you are holding a position of authority that can be used to cause damage to young people, can be used to, marginalise young people's voices, and creating space for young people to then be heard, I suppose. And so I guess in that sense, to not approach with assumptions.
Yeah.
Not approach what's going on for young people with any kind of assumption, allowing young people to determine your understanding of them.
Yeah.
And I think something everyday adults can do as well is like when talking to young people, like I guess listening to learn and to understand as opposed to listening to respond. That's probably the best way I could probably put it. Yeah.
Can I just also say that Everyday Adults is a really good band name?
Yeah. It actually is. Well, are we going to start a band now, Molly?
You're right.
Karaoke time.
Yeah. I can play on the drums. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't do anything. I'm not gifted enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with Molly, but I also wanted to add that everyday adult can, in terms of practices in how they engage with young people, I'll give you an example to illustrate my point better. When I've been to places where a group of young people are sitting together, they're having a normal discussion, and an adult will walk in and try to shush them because they're being so loud, apparently, or they're being disrespectful to others around them. For me, as long as the behavior is not putting another person in the room in danger, it shouldn't be automatically interpreted as a negative thing. They could be having a loud discussion, but it could be out of excitement, not argument per se. So things like that, and maybe places where young people gathered. I've seen places with security guards outside. So automatically that's saying young people are not allowed in here because we already assume that you're going to start something. You're going to,
and also
be violent.
We're watching you,
Yeah.
Like, don't make any wrong moves. We've got our eyes on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would tend to sit outside those areas, which is also problematic because why should they be outside when they should be inside? And the reason why they're outside is because you're watching them.
Yeah.
And when they are outside, they are also interpreted and labeled as disengaged because they're sitting outside, they're not engaging with the rest who are inside, not knowing that they are sitting outside, not because they want to be disengaged, but because you're not allowing them to engage.
Yeah, it's like that cycle of, young people making decisions and then it not being right according to, the community or to others or to adults. It can be quite tough. And I think that you all spoke really nicely of that open listening and being able to humble yourself as an adult, especially because young people are experts in their own lives. They know their experiences better than anybody. And I think that being able to listen to young people and what they need and what they want is quite important.
Well, wait, if I could also just like say this one last thing as well.
Yeah.
I think something lastly that adults can do is just like, I think they can be nostalgic in the sense of like knowing what it was like for them when they were young people as well. I think some adults forget that they were young once and they had interests and they had hobbies and they did different things. And,
they were a bit naughty sometimes.
Yeah, they were a bit naughty at times and stuff like that. It's like, and it's like even just having conversations with young people, just ask about their interests, ask about what their hobbies are, and just joke with them. Like I feel like humor is just so important, especially not just with young people, just with anyone you're really trying to interact with or engage with. Yeah.
Such a Libra energy.
But it is.
Humor is important when you are funny.
Yeah.
Not when you're not funny.
When you're not, no, it's not. Yeah.
Don't try it.
Yeah.
Najib, you are funny though. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to confirm, yeah, all good. I guess that idea of being nostalgic and thinking about your own experiences as when adults were kind of younger and thinking about that is really important, and it kind of leads into kind of my next question of having young people as youth workers and young people as youth workers working with young people. What's the significance of that? Because I know that that's something that is, especially now within BRIMBANK, is something that is quite prominent, getting young people as, or young youth workers to work with young people and seeing a difference and seeing a significance in that. Can you all elaborate on that and how that can be seen as quite powerful and important in engaging with young people, having young people work with them?
Najib, I think you should start this conversation off.
I think what's powerful about having like young workers working with young people, I think it sets up this like there isn't any sense of hierarchy in place of age or experience or anything like that. I think the what makes it really powerful, it sets up this like peer-led model of like, yes, I'm a worker, but it's like, hey, I'm only like a couple of years older than you, let's be honest. And I think it makes the relationship working with young people that much more fluid, because they don't see you as somebody that doesn't understand them or somebody that doesn't get it. And I think, it makes the relationship, so much better, actually, yeah.
I think also it really empowers the young people that you're working with, and it motivates them. It validates their dreams. If they see a young worker, in a professional position, that can validate their dreams or their career aspiration, that one day I can become like him, or I can become like her, or I can do it. If she can do it, or if he can do it, then why can I do it?
Exactly.
So young people become more, they build a stronger belief and practices towards their career goals, and they're more open, and facilitates group discussion where young people at the end of the discussion pull me aside and say, so how did you get your job? I'm looking for placement. Can you try to hook me up? So discussions like that, it really help them see that it's not only adults that could be professional. You can be too.
I think one thing it also does is it starts to undo some of the kind of saviour mentality that is embedded in youth work and social work to a large extent. I think to a much lesser extent, at least, young people don't bring that mentality to their work because they bring the lived experience of being a young person and therefore respecting other young people and committing to working alongside other young people rather than working to save or rescue young people.
Beautifully said. Just to wrap up the beauty of BRIMBANK, can you tell us just a few programs that you have going on right now or projects to work towards the whole engagement of youth?
Sure. There's plenty to talk about. BRIMBANK, like my team, so Youth Young Communities team, we work to a model for youth participation and voice that was designed by young people who we paid in April of 2018. So more than 2 years ago now, which is a bit of a mind-blowing realization for me. So that model has kind of lots of different elements to it that are designed to create multiple points of access for young people and to have kind of different levels of formality embedded within them and different opportunities within them as well. So one of the things that it's in that model is a youth-led publication called The Bold Source. And Najib is going to talk about that because that's his work. But I'll keep talking and then Najib can talk about that. So that's really about creating a platform, creating a space for young people to tell their own stories. We also have as part of that model, a youth council, and that's just been established this year. And I think we are going to have to keep learning about how to make that initiative one that's kind of a source of empowerment and a place for exchange rather than engagement, not only between workers and young people, but also between BRIMBANK counsellors and young people, because it is co-chaired by a BRIMBANK counsellor. I was pretty reticent to have a youth council. I think they can easily become pretty tokenistic, and I mean, one of the kind of key criticisms is that they attract the same kind of young person. That's a privileged young person who can give their time to groups like that. But the young people who designed the model were really clear, very adamant that they wanted a mechanism that was legitimised in the eyes of decision makers. And so that's why that came about, because it's about having a direct voice to the people who make decisions on behalf of the community. So we're just kind of learning about what that looks like. But I think the point is that the model that we work to, it's not just about having that group. It's not just about having that one group who, is meant to be representative of all young people. It's one aspect in a broader model that creates lots of different opportunities for young people to have a say. We also work with Swinburne University on our Young Researchers program. So that program trains young people in qualitative research skills. The students, so secondary school students, so schools kind of sign up for the program. But the point is to train those young people with the skills that they need to be able to undertake research on challenges within their school and peer communities, and then report back at the end of the year with recommendations to their leadership teams and to our mayor and councillors as well. So they're having that kind of direct say and input with the people who make decisions. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was that we're kind of always trying to work on and expand our work with young people with a disability. So we do we hold this kind of biannual disco for young people, which is kind of intended to support young people to develop social skills and to, have a bit of fun, have a day out, have a bit of a break, meet students from other specialist schools. It's a really lovely day, but there was no element within it of empowerment or voice for the young people who were involved. It was very much delivery. So we've been working to kind of expand that program a little bit so that young people have opportunities beforehand to take ownership of that space. So they come and we work together in a bit of a creative space to envisage what the disco will look like, what the decorations will be. They play a hand in making some of those decorations, but it's also a way for staff to be able to have some informal conversations around what they would like that experience to be. So we're always looking to how we make those small adjustments to better incorporate the voices and perspectives of the young people we work with.
Those sound amazing. Yeah. Najib?
Yeah, so one of the programs I do in Molly's team is the Bold Source, which is like a youth magazine for young people that live in the Brimbank area, but also in the inner and outer west as well. As loosely as we like to say, who live, work, study, or connected in any way.
Into sunshine.
Yeah.
Just cut a train of sunshine and station as a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the magazine, we have we have a committee of young editors who play like a pivotal role, and I guess they came up with the name, they came up with sort of like the look, the feel, the different pieces that we want, and we've set up sort of like the editors editing other young people's work. So it's kind of like sets up that sort of like peer-led model as well. But then we've also kind of like given them training and given them support as well and guidance. And I guess the youth magazine is exciting because it's like, it feels like building a sense of community. Like young people working with other young people, we getting young people's stories and showcasing to them and promoting that for them. So that's super, super exciting. And then sort of like the other work that I do at BLF, because our work is really learning and employment focused, and we've done lots of programming for that. So some of the work I do there is like I do scholarship support with young people, and also because it's all ages, like community members as well, that are either going into study or returning back into study that need, I guess, financial support with uni or TAFE. And then also like this other program I do is like, I do this online homework club now with young people, with tutors, myself, and I just do it over like Zoom. And that's really, really cool as well. So yeah.
Nice. And a coach?
Yeah. Like Najib mentioned, BRIMBANK Learning Futures work with all age group. However, I will just touch on things that we've done with young people. We currently we have 2 continuing programs. However, before that, we've ran workshops with young people to do, with the employment law, how to identify bullying in workplace. And we've worked closely with YLab. I'm sure you've heard of them. They ran a couple of series session on various different topics that targeted young people's needs around BRIMBANK. Currently, I worked on a program called Beyond Your Resume. So that's teaching young people interview skills and assisting them with how to write key selection criteria and cover letters, because we've noticed that gaining employment it's hard for everyone, but it's been harder for a young person, especially attending an interview. So we do mock interviews once they get an interview date, so they can come in and we can form a panel, interview panel where we can practice with them, and we can also give them references if we've seen them a couple of times on that program also. And the other one is what Najib mentioned, the online homework club. So that's really picking up, especially during these times of coronavirus and young people having to do their school work from home. So it has been really, really great, and a lot of families really appreciate that there are young people who are assisting other young people online with their assignments and homework and having access to professional tutors. So that's been good, and Najib has been killing it pretty much.
You've been killing it too. We're all killing it,
bro.
Nice. Yeah, you guys doing a lot of work, especially within BRIMBANK, and it's always so great to hear the amazing work that's going out there and how young people are being supported and uplifted in the community. We are going to do a quick round of a fast round questions. So
I'm ready.
The first, have you thought about these answers, Najib? The first kind of answer that comes to your mind. So the first question, what would your last meal on earth be?
Roast potatoes. So white.
Just roast potatoes?
That was weird. That was so strange. I wasn't expecting that.
I was expecting it.
With gravy though, or just roast potatoes?
Just like roasted with rosemary, bit of garlic. Mwah.
Wait, was it potato or tomato? Because I heard tomato.
I don't know. Sorry, what, AJ?
Oh, is it potato or tomato?
No, potato.
Potato, yeah.
I heard tomato. That's why I'm like, that is so strange. Roasted
potatoes.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Najib?
I don't know. It's like, I think I would actually probably say pasta. Like, I love pasta so much.
Yeah. I love
Yeah, that would probably be my last meal. And a glass of Fanta, well.
That combo.
So much.
That combination.
A coach?
Port cuisine.
Oh, it's hard. I would say fish, because I'm a fish freak. I love fish. So, a soup, a fish soup maybe. I know.
No, that's good. That's much more refined than roast potatoes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had just said potatoes, that covers a whole range of things.
That's true, actually. I could have had mash. I could have
chips.
Yeah.
But you said roast.
Yeah. Had to be specific.
Yeah.
All right, second question. What, or I guess who, is your biggest inspiration? Oh, it does say who.
Mother Teresa for me.
Okay, solid.
I was going to be really lame and just say my mum, actually. She was the first member of her family to go to university. She was the first one to leave her very rural upbringing. And she has kind of forged her own path in the well-being and education space. And she's so smart, and it blows my mind.
That's lovely. Did you?
I don't know. I find it so difficult because, like, I want to stay close to home and be like my mom and my dad, but I also want to be like, oh yeah, like Malcolm X.
He's right there, Najib.
Yeah.
He's right there.
That answers the question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
what is your life mantra?
I'll tell you what mine is. Live slow, die cozy.
Roast potatoes are not cozy. It should be.
I'm loving working from home, clearly. I was meant to be here. Yeah. Najib, what's yours?
Number one priority.
Oh, I don't know. Like, I have a few mantras. My favorite one is this one I say to myself when I don't know what I'm doing, if I started a new job or I don't know where I'm going with, like, I just started doing my master's now, and something I just tell myself is like, I will figure it out. I will figure it out. I will figure it out. That's what I just tell myself. Like, I will figure it all out.
It's like positive psychology. That's cool.
Yeah. I'll figure it all out. Yeah. Some way, somehow, I'll figure it all out. Yeah.
Everything always falls into place at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah. That's another good mantra. Yeah. Things have a way of working out. That's I take that back. That's my favorite. Yeah.
You've worded it better. There you go. Yeah.
What's yours, a coach?
Oh, it's hard. I have a few. But I think mine depends on the situation that I'm in.
True.
But I think the umbrella is probably I can. I always tell myself I can do this.
Yeah.
It's just going to take time, but I can do it. Some I can't do, but I don't like saying can't do.
There's a thing.
Yeah.
Some things I won't do.
Yeah.
I love that. And because our show is called the RAD Experience for Roshani and AD, of course, we will finish up by asking, what is your most raddest experience?
I think for me, it's when I was backpacking in South America. I mean, I love that place. So can do it all over again and again and again.
I guess we'll have to hit you up later for the details.
Yeah.
South America.
Yeah.
Molly?
Did you want to go, Molly, first?
Look, I have had lots of really rad experiences. I think I was going to say last year I walked from the west coast to the east coast of England, which was really fun. It took me 2 weeks, and it was incredibly beautiful and a really cool kind of physical challenge as well. But I think actually the raddest experiences are really actually rooted in day to day and the kind of exchanges that I get to have with the people that I work with and the people that I love. And I think as I get older, more and more, I realize how lucky I am to have those exchanges. So, yeah, I think that's actually the minuscule things actually add up to one big kind of rad thing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, for me, probably one raddest thing for me is like I went overseas by myself to Japan, and I was telling this to my friend yesterday, where like I really tried my best to like go off and do things on my own, and there were so many times I got lost, and I was just walking the streets of I was just walking.
Did you call me like twice a week while I was in Japan?
Yeah. Yeah, there was just so many times I was just lost and just like asking directions, and people were helping me, and that was probably my raddest experience, that like
getting lost in Japan.
Just getting lost in Japan.
Yeah. And you got through, I think that's the other thing, like you came out the other side of it having done that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty big. Well, thank you so much, Molly, Najib, and Akush. You guys have been absolutely amazing and have shared some really great insights into the work that you do and the work that you're continuing to do for young people in the community. And I know that, working in this space alongside youth workers in BRIMBANK, there's a lot of great things going on, and young people in this community are very, very lucky to have you all. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we can chat to you guys and see how these projects are going on. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
No worries. You're listening to the RAD Experience on BRIMBANK Live with Roshani and AD. We just finished up talking to Molly, Najib and Akush, who are youth workers within BRIMBANK. Check out their platforms and their projects.